Hey guys, welcome back to the Reading Stack. I'm Hunter, and today I have a wonderful book to share with you. It is the book Hagakure, The Way of the Samurai by Yamamoto Tsunetomo. Now this book is a compiling of different conversations that the real author had with Yamamoto Tsunetomo between the years of 1709 to 1716, so several centuries back. It is the name Hagakure, I believe translated to English is something like hidden by the leaves or hidden leaves from what I looked at online, but I don't know for sure. The book is 119 pages, and so it's a pretty short read, and it's filled with a lot of good stuff. What is the book exactly? The book is a guide or a commentary for warriors from a samurai. It is this samurai, Tsunetomo's views on Bushido, which is the way of the samurai, the code, if you will. It's the practices, the philosophies, the principles that a samurai would live by and fulfill. And it's very fluid, like from what I've looked at online, like a lot of the codes we have, like chivalry. It's very hard to pin down all the values and practices you would do to be chivalrous, as it historically is defined. Just like Southern etiquette, for me being from Arkansas in the South, it may be different from how someone behaves in Florida or Georgia or somewhere out there, and vary from person to person as what a good Southerner does and does not do. And just all codes are like that, you could say, etiquette and philosophical beliefs. I'm reading a lot on Stoicism lately, and it's very funny looking at how different ancient Stoicism is from modern Stoicism, and so stuff can greatly change over time. This book, it took place in Japan's historic period called the Edo period, from basically like the 1600s through the 1800s, 200 years that were pretty peaceful, progressive times for Japan. There wasn't any foreign war, or there wasn't any war, people invading the Japanese shores and things like that. So it was a very different time for the warriors, the samurai, a time where they were more into maintaining internal security in Japan, being like a police effort, and some of them the Ronin and the samurai retainers would be bodyguards, or they could be cutthroats, robbers, kind of like the mafia, the Yakuza, if you will. These warriors weren't all engaged against a major foreign power of some kind, but a lot of what they were doing was how in America we might compare to like the National Guard or militias, in a rough sense, groups that want to just maintain order, security, keep business running as usual, safety. But, it's a time sort of where the guy whose conversation's recording, or Tsunetomo, he's wanting to really codify and preserve the samurai ethic and the culture in a time where stuff's really changing. He doesn't want people to fall away from what's good, but to preserve that and not have that samurai way of Bushido for it to be corrupted just through change and neglect over time. So what's in this book? Well, I'm going to read 4 separate passages, short ones, just to show you. And the first passage I'll read is on page 22. According to the situation, there are times when you must rely on a person for something or other. If this is done repeatedly, it becomes a matter of importuning that person and can be rather rude. If there is something that must be done, it is better not to rely on others. There is something to be learned from a rainstorm. When meeting with a sudden shower, you try not to get wet and run quickly along the road. But doing such things as passing under the eaves of houses, you still get wet. When you are resolved from the beginning, you will not be perplexed, though you still get the same soaking. This understanding extends to everything. In China, there was once a man who liked pictures of dragons, and his clothing and furnishings were all designed accordingly. His deep affection for dragons was brought to the attention of the dragon god, and one day, a real dragon appeared before his window. It is said that he died of fright. He was probably a man who always spoke big words but acted differently when facing the real thing. You know, that makes me think a lot of, real life examples of people very infatuated with gang culture and crime, but, you know, always wanting to be kind of like a thug or macho. But then one day, you know, they meet something that's bigger than their match and they either get humiliated or killed or, you know, whatever it could be. But, you know, this guy, he wanted to see a dragon so bad and was so infatuated that one day he ran into that trouble. And the sayings before, you know, a lot of the way the samurai is facing the inevitable, that you can face it well. And it's kind of like that in the rain, you know, is this person's surprised and miserable, and then another person isn't, but they're going to get wet either way, and you kind of have to embrace or live with that. And it's all about the prior resolution before you're in trouble being resolved to face it. And on page 50, shame and repentance are like upsetting a pot of water. When a certain friend of mine listened to the way that a man who had stolen his sword ornament confessed, he felt compassion. If one will rectify his mistakes, their traces will soon disappear. Now that's also something, as this man faced his mistake, his particular sin of theft, he faced it and he made that restitution, and it was a lot better than running away from it. As it says, if one will rectify his mistakes, their traces will soon disappear. So he came and made that restitution. It was if that mistake, that crime, or that transgression never happened. So I think that's a really good saying there. You know, on page 34. When I was young, I kept a diary of regret and tried to record my mistakes day by day. But there was never a day when I didn't have 20 or 30 entries. As there was no end to it, I gave up. Even today, when I think about the day's affairs after going to bed, there is never a day when I do not make some blunder in speaking or in some activity. Living without mistakes is truly impossible, but this is something that people who live by cleverness have no inclination to think about. When reading something aloud, it is best to read from the belly. Reading from one's mouth, one's voice will not endure. This is Nakano Shikibu's teaching. So that's just a bunch of different wisdom he distills through here for people. And I think the first part is you make mistakes regardless. You can never avoid mistakes. You have to just be resolved that you're going to make faults, that we are flawed and we do make mistakes. As it says, some people don't think about their mistakes, but truly a wise person does think about the way they err and falter. And we can never get completely free of making mistakes, but we can really think and evaluate those. As he said, even today, when I think about the day's affairs after going to bed, there's never a day when I do not make some blunder in speaking or in some activity. So there's always room to grow, room to learn, because we continually make mistakes, whether they be old or new ones. And then at the last, it says, when reading something aloud, it is best to read from the belly, and that would be the diaphragm, you could say, where we can press the air and it's not all working the vocal muscles to death. That's a great lesson, one of the best I've ever learned in reading or public speaking. And plus, if you speak like this, it does make your voice deeper, stronger, if you will, and doesn't destroy those muscles and everything you need to use to speak. Make you go hoarse. And then on page 1, the way of the samurai is found in death. When it comes to either or, there is only the quick choice of death. It is not particularly difficult. Be determined in advance. To say that dying without reaching one's aim is to die a dog's death is the frivolous way of sophisticates. When pressed with the choice of life or death, it is not necessary to gain one's aim. And that just kind of really summates the way of the samurai. It does talk about you do have the desire, the will to win, to accomplish your goal. But ultimately, though, the big question in combat, battle, or just in dealing with life is, am I ready? Am I okay? Resolved to die. And it's not shying away from that. As I listened to a podcast from one veteran who fought in many of our wars in the 21st, in the 20th and 21st century, he talked about moments before he was about to kill an enemy combatant, and he could see the switch go off in their mind or in their body language. That was that kind of begging for their life, or not resolved to die yet, regret, or something's left undone, and that it would be too late, to fix that. But he talked about how he was always, he had everything taken care of, to where his family, if he was gone, his family would be able to live well and make it, and he would be at peace and dying and going to the afterlife. And so he had all that resolved. So he said he was, really unshaken when it came to battle and combat. But he saw so many people that when death was just right there, they weren't ready for it. And it was a very thrilling, scary, just shocking thing he said. But it really made me think a lot about what I had read in Hagakure about that. Is in that moment you have to live as if you were dead, to truly even make it out alive, to accomplish the mission, not to be concerned with this huge, the elephant in the room, if you will, about dying in a place where you can be killed by direct fire or indirect fire, or maybe a vehicular incident, or who knows what. With just death all around, you just have to face it. You have to be, just be squared away, ready to face it, because to not be ready could be fatal, and it could be disastrous after you're gone for the people around you. So does Hagakure belong on your bookshelf? I'd say yes, if you're into anything that's samurai, if you're into the anime that has samurai, or manga, or, if you like the samurai movies, if you've liked The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, if you've liked so many of those just epic warrior films, or, if you're interested just in warfare as it is, this book is a great just warrior philosophy distilled throughout. And there's great wisdom, about taking care of yourself, your health, treating people with respect. There's just great wisdom to share throughout its pages. And this guy was definitely a wise man with a lot of the wisdom he shares. And there was a lot of great valuable lessons to learn. And this is a very important Japanese book. This book kind of faded away for 200 years after it was published. And finally it regained popularity in the 30s, I believe, when Japan was imperial, when they were ramping up for World War II. It was a very important book for their philosophy, and seeing just their resoluteness in fighting American, British, Australian soldiers, that they were just super super warriors. They were just in a different mindset, very suicidal at times as an excess, but very fierce. Not many would be taken prisoner or face any kind of disgrace. They fought to the end in most situations. And so this book is also a cult classic. It's it's a book that people do recognize as really good and important of samurai literature. If you've seen the movie Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai with Forrest Whitaker, that's a great film, one of my favorites. And quotations from this book are littered throughout, as Forrest Whitaker's character uses this for instruction to how to live, and he's a hitman, but moral guidance for his life. And so we can get a lot of good guidance out of this, not just about killing or being a Forrest Whitaker hitman. And it's a short read at 119 pages. When I got it, I think I read it in a day and a half. So it's good if you're in for a short read. Reasons why you wouldn't like it: if you just don't have any interest in really like Eastern literature, and it isn't easy. A lot of times being translated into English, it's pretty rough. Some of the books I've read, making the language very easy for us to understand. The punctuation, a lot of things can make it more difficult than reading a Western book. And if you just don't have interest in all the layers you have to peel back to understand Japanese culture, the Buddhism, the Shinto, the various periods and daimyos and all this, there's a big learning gap you have to get through as a Westerner. But if you don't have the interest, then this probably wouldn't be the best book. For a lot of things would be lost to you. People in this time wearing makeup, there's advice on how to properly wear makeup, and also advice on, I think, homosexuality when I read this, and that was pretty shocking. Another thing is, not all of the advice he gives is very applicable, I would think, for us in the modern day, but in their time period it was probably very relevant, and it's just good to have all that there so you can read it in its unfiltered original form. But just not all of it's super solid or applicable, so when you read that, it can kind of be a turn off when it's just not all hitting the marks for the reader, so to speak. So that may be reasons why you wouldn't want it on your bookshelf, as well as the reasons to get it on your bookshelf. Okay, lessons. What lessons can we get from Hagakure? I think the biggest lesson, handling that elephant in the room of death, the lesson is to live well. We have to be focused on dying well. We have to consider both. And this book is littered with life advice, because of course you're going to do these things while you're living, but so much of it is interwoven into death, to being die ready, as you could say. Because if you're so focused on living well, you could be all wrapped up in living and leave so much that when your life is taken suddenly, as many people I know have died surprisingly of COVID. I had an aunt, not from COVID, but from cancer, die this past week. I'm also distantly related to Rush Limbaugh, the conservative media personality, and he had passed away recently. So it's been a little bit more on my mind, death. And you gotta just think you could die at any time, and various things in this world can kill you. So you can't be so busy with life that you just leave things undone, to where it could hurt or harm, make it more difficult for your relatives, or you in that moment of death being so reticent or miserable in dying because you think about all that you failed to do, all that you've left. You haven't reconciled with some people, you haven't finished these goals, or you just haven't made peace. You may not have peace with God, peace with people in your family, and you just have so many questions about what happens now with things on earth and things to come, and you just die without easing out. I don't know a whole lot about death, of course, because I'm not dead. Haven't walked that yet, but the point of this is, the lesson is that the samurai, the warrior, is focused on dying, and in that he's able to accomplish what he needs to with his life, to in those final moments do something honorable. If it's charging the enemy, or saving his master's life, or whatever it could be, you have to be ready for death. If you think about if you were rescuing someone's life, say someone's drowning in water, in that moment, if you're wanting to rescue them to save their life, and it's in a dangerous, if it's out in the deep water, if you don't have your own death resolved in your mind, you may not mentally, spiritually, whatever, be able to go out and save them. Fear could trap you and overtake you, and that wouldn't be a very honorable thing, especially if you had the will that said, I want to go save them, but I can't, because I can't die yet. So it's important that dimension of death in life, to live well, to be resolved, to fight adversity, even if it costs you, even if you pay the ultimate price. Well, guys, I hope you will check out Hagakure. I hope I've given a pretty good review of it. There's a lot more in here I haven't shared. I do hope you will check it out, and I thank y'all so much for tuning in today to hear about this great read. And we'll have more content for y'all soon. Be sure to subscribe, like, tell us what you think in the comments, and we'll have more books and more our video cast Shooting the Breeze. Y'all have a great day. Bye.